Angela Bassett. Angela Bassett's portrayal of Tina Turner required one of the most physically grueling preparations ever undertaken for a biographical performance. With only 30 days to transform her body into that of a high-intensity rock performer, Bassett followed a daily schedule that began before sunrise and lasted past nightfall. Her regimen included hours of weight training, sustained cardio sessions, and choreography rehearsals with Michael Peters, whose routines demanded precision, stamina, and emotional expression simultaneously. Her diet consisted almost entirely of lean protein, vegetables, black coffee, and water, designed to maintain energy without adding bulk. Tina Turner personally guided Bassett through signature movements rooted in Turner's early church influences, shaping the kinetic vocabulary of the character well beyond surface-level mimicry. Bassett approached Turner's voice by studying the mechanics behind each breath and vowel, noting exactly when Turner inhaled during phrases to match the physical exertion of live performance. This made the lip-synced musical sequences feel as close to live as possible. The emotional component of the role was equally demanding. Bassett had to portray years of domestic abuse with clarity and restraint rather than sensationalism, crafting scenes where Turner calculates survival rather than surrender. One of the film's most memorable scenes occurs during Turner's final escape from Ike, filmed in a single night as Bassett performed multiple takes of running, fighting, and collapsing while maintaining continuity in expression and movement. A lesser-known detail is that Bassett suffered repeated muscle injuries during filming, but continued performing full routines to maintain Turner's physical realism on camera. Despite the depth of this work, she lost the Oscar to Holly Hunter in The Piano, a performance built around minimal dialogue and internalized expression. The contrast highlighted a recurring Academy tendency to reward subdued performances over physically expansive ones, particularly when evaluating Black women whose roles require visible exertion. Whoopi Goldberg. Whoopi Goldberg's performance as Celie in The Color Purple required mastery of a character defined largely through silence. With no previous film experience, Goldberg was cast after Alice Walker saw her one-woman stage show and believed she could embody Celie's emotional interior. The role demanded a portrayal of a woman crushed by incest, domestic abuse, and lifelong subordination, yet capable of profound transformation. For much of the film's first half, Celie barely speaks, forcing Goldberg to communicate trauma through posture, hesitation, and eye movement. Her physical stillness became a critical storytelling device, and her background as a performer who created characters through gesture rather than dialogue shaped her approach. Drawing from her pre-fame work as a mortuary makeup artist, she developed an unusually controlled understanding of facial tension and micro-expression, which directors later cited as essential to the film's emotional weight. One of the film's most memorable moments occurs during the dinner table confrontation with Mr., where Celie slowly rises from decades of silence and delivers a curse with unwavering intensity. This scene required precise emotional escalation, building from repression to defiance without theatrical exaggeration. Another iconic sequence is the moment Celie finally smiles openly, revealing the gap in her teeth, which Goldberg insisted on showing as a marker of character authenticity rather than glamour. A lesser-known fact is that she performed the scene in which Celie reads Nettie's letters in a single sustained take, drawing on her stage training to maintain emotional continuity without cuts. Despite the performance receiving near-universal acclaim, the film entered awards season amid controversy. Critics argued over Spielberg's portrayal of Black male characters and the toned-down depiction of Celie's relationship with Shug Avery. The film earned 11 nominations and won none, tying the record for the largest shutout in Oscar history. Goldberg lost to veteran actress Geraldine Page, whose win was widely regarded as driven by overdue recognition rather than head-to-head comparison of the roles. Dorothy Dandridge. Dorothy Dandridge's performance in Carmen Jones was a complete reinvention of what Hollywood believed a Black actress could do in the mid-1950s. At the time, roles for Black women were narrowly limited to maids or maternal figures, and no major studio had ever positioned a Black woman as a glamorous romantic lead, driving the entire plot of a large-scale production. Dandridge understood this limitation and deliberately reshaped her public image to secure the role. After an initial failed audition where director Otto Preminger dismissed her as too gentle for the fiery Carmen, she returned with a transformed look, posture, and vocal cadence that precisely aligned with his vision of a sensual, impulsive protagonist. That second audition functioned as a strategic dismantling of her Hollywood persona. Once cast, she faced a production environment marked by rigid direction, forcing her to generate intensity through physical acting, movement, and expression rather than camera support. The musical requirements presented further challenges. Although Dandridge was a trained singer, the operatic score exceeded her range, leading the studio to dub her vocals with those of a young opera student, Marilyn Horne. Matching Horne's phrasing, vibrato, and breath patterns required thousands of hours of rehearsal to synchronize neck muscles and breathing to an operatic standard. Even Horne later acknowledged the uncanny precision of Dandridge's performance. During filming, Dandridge also endured routine hostility from Preminger, which at one point escalated to a physical confrontation on set. Despite these conditions, the final performance displayed a seamless command of sensuality, defiance, and vulnerability that critics praised for its intensity. A lesser-known fact is that the film's most iconic scene, where Carmen circles Joe during the "That's Love" sequence, was largely improvised to compensate for static camera framing, showcasing Dandridge's instinctive choreography under pressure. Pam Grier. Pam Grier's role in Jackie Brown marked a significant shift from the image that defined her earlier career. Known throughout the 1970s for blaxploitation films built around action and sexual power, Grier had spent years struggling to find substantial work by the time Quentin Tarantino adapted Rum Punch and rewrote the lead character specifically for her. Instead of the aggressive, weapon-wielding heroines she once played, Jackie Brown is a middle-aged flight attendant whose strength lies in calculation, emotional restraint, and strategic patience. Grier anchored the character through stillness, creating a performance built on observation rather than confrontation. The film's opening sequence, where she glides through an airport terminal while the camera tracks her in profile, establishes a sense of self-possession and weary resilience without a single line of dialogue. Much of the role's impact comes from Grier's ability to show Jackie thinking through problems in real time, using minimal facial movements to signal shifts in strategy. Her scenes opposite Robert Forster rely heavily on controlled pauses, subtle eye contact, and softened vocal tones, creating a dynamic that positions Jackie as both vulnerable and unquestionably in command. One memorable moment occurs during the mall exchange sequence, where Jackie maintains a steady, unbroken composure while orchestrating multiple parties in a dangerous sting operation. A lesser-known fact is that Grier drew upon her real-life experience of surviving cervical cancer to shape Jackie's calmness under pressure, channeling the emotional clarity she developed during her recovery. Despite critical acclaim, Grier was completely shut out of the Oscar nominations. Her omission illustrated the Academy's long-standing reluctance to legitimize genre performances, especially crime thrillers led by black women. Miramax, focused on supporting other films that season, devoted limited resources to her awards campaign. While Robert Forster received a supporting actor nomination for the same film, Grier's lead performance was overlooked, reinforcing a pattern in which black women are denied recognition for roles that deviate from traditional dramatic archetypes. Diahann Carroll. Diahann Carroll's work in Claudine required a complete dismantling of her established public identity. Before this role, Carroll was known for polished elegance, couture gowns, and the refined image built through her Tony Award-winning stage career and her groundbreaking sitcom Julia. Casting her as a weary single mother of 6 living in Harlem, navigating both poverty and the welfare system, seemed unlikely to critics and studio executives. Carroll approached the role by stripping away every aspect of her glamorous persona. Working closely with costume designers, she selected clothes that were intentionally worn, faded, and practical, ensuring the wardrobe reflected a woman stretching limited resources. Shooting on location near the neighborhood where she grew up, Carroll pulled from childhood memories of working-class women who carried entire households through sheer determination. She shaped Claudine's personality around this emotional realism, creating a portrayal that communicated humor, frustration, and resilience in equal measure. The film's central dynamic between Carroll's Claudine and James Earl Jones's Rupert depended heavily on subtle emotional shifts. Their scenes frequently explored the strain placed on families by welfare policies that penalized households with an employed male presence. Carroll's performance had to convey love, fear, attraction, and exhaustion simultaneously, using small gestures and tonal changes rather than dramatic speeches. The natural chemistry between Carroll and Jones anchors several key moments, including the scene where Claudine attempts to hide Rupert from social workers, blending comedic timing with real anxiety about the consequences of losing benefits. A lesser-known detail is that Carroll delivered many of her most impactful scenes with minimal rehearsal, preferring spontaneity to maintain the character's authenticity. This instinctive style surprised younger cast members, who noted how she could shift emotional gears mid-scene with no preparation. Carroll received a Best Actress nomination, but the Academy gravitated toward Ellen Burstyn's performance in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, which aligned more closely with white middle-class feminist narratives favored at the time. Carroll's loss highlighted the Academy's discomfort with stories rooted in black working-class survival rather than individual reinvention. Alfre Woodard. Alfre Woodard's performance in Clemency is built on extreme control, micro-expression, and psychological precision. Playing Bernadine Williams, a death row warden whose emotional resilience has eroded after years of overseeing executions, Woodard constructed a character defined not by dramatic outbursts but by the gradual collapse of internal structure. To prepare, Woodard and director Chinonye Chukwu visited real death row facilities in Ohio, speaking with wardens, correctional officers, and incarcerated men. These visits revealed the heavy stillness of execution chambers and the subdued demeanor of those who inhabit them daily. Woodard incorporated this energy into Bernadine's posture and breathing patterns, adopting a rigid, formal physicality meant to signal a professional facade barely holding together. The film opens with a botched execution, shown largely through Woodard's restrained reaction. Her face remains composed, but the micro-tremors in her jaw and the tightness around her eyes communicate shock and dread. Later scenes, including the moment where she asks a condemned man, "Can I get you anything?" are stark examples of how Woodard conveys moral exhaustion through understatement. One particularly memorable sequence shows Bernadine alone in her office, meticulously aligning papers and straightening objects on her desk, using mechanical order to suppress rising panic. A lesser-known detail from production is that Woodard performed several long takes without blinking for extended periods, a technique she used to reflect Bernadine's refusal to allow herself moments of emotional release. Despite widespread acclaim and multiple critics' awards, Woodard was completely shut out of Oscar nominations. The primary obstacle was campaign funding. Clemency was released by Neon, which allocated nearly all awards resources to Parasite during the same season. Without financial backing for screenings, advertisements, or influencer outreach, Woodard's performance failed to reach enough Academy voters. Her exclusion highlighted the systemic disadvantage faced by Black actresses who lead small, independent dramas without multi-million-dollar awards budgets. Viola Davis. Viola Davis approached the role of Ma Rainey by rejecting every convention of glamour normally imposed on Black actresses in leading roles. Portraying the mother of the blues required a physical transformation that was intentionally heavy, sweaty, and unapologetically forceful. Davis gained significant weight and used carefully designed padding to approximate Ma Rainey's large, imposing frame. Collaborating with makeup artist Sergio Lopez Rivera, she adopted a grease paint-based look that smeared under heat, creating the effect of a performer laboring under stage lights and lacking access to professional beauty tools. Her gold dental caps altered her speech rhythm, and her gait was modeled after a combination of Southern relatives and Aretha Franklin's early performance posture. Costume designer Anne Roth built suits that looked worn from travel, deliberately creased and weathered to reflect the lifestyle of a touring musician during the 1920s. Davis infused Ma Rainey with a deep understanding of power dynamics. In several scenes, she uses silence, minimal movement, or deliberate slowness to assert control over white producers attempting to diminish her authority. One of the film's most striking moments is Ma Rainey's confrontation over the inclusion of a Coke bottle, where Davis maintains unbroken eye contact and an unwavering stance to force compliance, demonstrating how Rainey weaponized presence rather than politeness. Another iconic sequence is the recording studio scene in which she refuses to sing until every demand is met, a portrayal grounded in historical accounts of Rainey's insistence on respect within segregated entertainment industries. A lesser-known detail is that Davis intentionally allowed her breathing to remain loud and labored during takes, reflecting Rainey's lifelong struggle with respiratory issues and reinforcing the physical toll of her profession. Despite delivering a performance rooted in historical research and transformative craft, Davis lost the Oscar to Frances McDormand, whose role in Nomadland emphasized naturalism, minimal makeup, and a documentary-style aesthetic. The outcome reflected a recurring trend. The Academy often privileges understated performances from white actresses over physically transformative roles undertaken by Black women, even when the latter require greater structural complexity and technical discipline. Danielle Deadwyler. Danielle Deadwyler's performance in Till required an exacting balance of restraint and devastation. Playing Mamie Till Mobley demanded an approach that avoided melodrama, while still conveying the psychological implosion of a mother confronted with the murder of her 14-year-old son, Emmett Till. Deadwyler grounded the character in the joy, discipline, and intellectual precision that defined Mamie's real life. Shaped in part by Deadwyler's background in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference tradition, this foundation allowed her to portray grief as something that descends gradually, not explosively. Director Chinonye Chukwu filmed several scenes in extended takes, using silence as an emotional instrument. Deadwyler's facial expressions had to shift almost imperceptibly as Mamie processed new information, requiring meticulous control over breath, eye movement, and jaw tension. One of the film's most memorable moments occurs when Mamie views her son's body. Deadwyler performed the scene without dramatic wailing, instead depicting a physical collapse marked by trembling, breath-catching, and a slow folding of her body toward the coffin. The stillness of the moment amplified its impact. Another defining sequence is the televised speech, where Mamie articulates the racial terror inflicted on her family. Deadwyler executed it in a single continuous take, shifting from composure to trembling anger while maintaining precise vocal control. A lesser-known detail is that she practiced the speech using rhythmic breathing patterns taken from church oratory, allowing her to sustain emotional intensity without losing clarity. Despite near-unanimous critical acclaim and widespread predictions that she would receive an Oscar nomination, Deadwyler was excluded. Her campaign was overtaken by a sudden, celebrity-driven push for Andrea Riseborough in To Leslie. Orchestrated through private screenings, direct outreach by well-connected white actresses, and viral endorsements. This socially coordinated effort displaced both Deadwyler and Viola Davis from the nomination lineup. The incident underscored how social capital functions as an unofficial currency in awards season, benefiting those with access to elite networks, while sidelining black actresses who lack the same institutional connections. Loved exploring these actresses with me? You'll be obsessed with the next one waiting right here. Click and dive in.